Journey of the Songhi People is a 4-part film series based on the African Genesis theory and book of the late Dr. Edward Robinson Jr. His mission for 70 of his 94 years was to tell all Americans to love and respect one another.
Wouldn't it be beautiful if all of the different colors and races in America, with all their different features and hair, were thought of individually with value of the differences?
I am disturbed at the condition of our people meaning black people in America.
We have been miseducated.
It was a time if you called me an African, you better be ready to fight. Because that was the most low-down, dirty, insulting insult you could give me. But if you call me an African now, I'll never leave your side.
The series identifies the problem and offers a cultural solution for people of color in a systemic approach.
Deepest conflict is the black-white conflict.
It is the contention of Dr. Edward Robinson that many of the ills facing black America stem from the lack of knowledge of the true history of Americans of African descent, a history that began long before the Mayflower.
That their fathers and mothers were not the people that you've been taught that they were. They did not come from a jungle. They came from beautiful cities in West Africa called Songhi.
We have to begin to recognize and decode both the overt signals that our media has given us that Africans are inferior, that Africans are not able to play an important and crucial role on the human stage.
The history of black people did not begin with the Civil Rights Movement. The history of black people did not begin with slavery. But where did it begin? It began in the beginning.
Beginning on the African continent, we examine the cultural infrastructure and worldview of the kingdoms of Africa that were destroyed by European slave trading. Yet, from that Ma'afa arose a vibrant, highly influential cultural milieu, whose byproducts stretch from the Giza Plateau in Egypt to the Door of No Return in Senegal and Ghana, to Bahia in Brazil, to the Louisiana Bayou, to the streets of Harlem, and to the steppes of Georgia. More importantly, we make the point that culturally, as the t-shirt says, we are all Africans.
Just the way material is taught, there's a racist undertone that I think would finally, be dealt with if Europeans could actually learn about the history just as much as we learn about it. Maybe they can change the tone, change the way they teach, change the way they approach students of any race in their class.
The Journey series examines how going back in time to unearth the true history of a people can engender a rebirth of pride and cultural awareness to counter many of the negative ills that continue to beset the black community.
In 1915, America produced a show, a motion picture, called The Birth of a Nation. And it was a tremendous disregarding of the beauty and grandeur of our ancestral home.
From an anthropological standpoint, it is an accepted fact in this day and age that the human race began in Africa. From those beginnings, people from the Dark Continent went on to populate every part of the globe. Cultures that flourished hundreds and in many cases thousands of years prior to any contact with Europe or what historians refer to as Western civilization. Africa, the cradle of civilization, comes alive to echo its grandeur and sophistication through countless generations of African Americans whose image of themselves only as slaves to be bought and sold kept them bound. We examine artifacts, ruins, visit museums and galleries, and see what the world was like at the time when the objects were created or the edifices constructed. We came to this nation in a totally different way, in a totally different context than any other people. This project has been years in the making and features reenactments and dramatizations, as well as commentary, interviews with celebrities, historians, scholars, academicians, community activists, entrepreneurs, artists, and theologians. The series will cover the subliminal impact of movies, television programming, music, and other media. Egyptologist, author, historian, Dr. Anthony Browder, who has gone to Egypt over 54 times learning our history, will reflect on our beginnings as he travels through the pyramids, museums, and shows us his 10-year tomb excavation in Luxor, among the Valley of the Kings.
The burial chamber of Karakoum, which is some 28 feet below the floor of the tomb itself, which is some 40 feet below ground level.
Dr. Chika Akua will teach us as to how learning our true history can reflect on our youth's attitudes about themselves. Knowledge of the survivors being the strongest of the strong, fittest of the fit, is needed by African American youth.
Almost everything originated in Africa, but we see examples of it or replications of it and even distortions of it in other places around the world.
Dr. Kwa David Whitaker and the chief of his village in Elmina will show us about our migration to the west coast of Africa, known as the Songhi Empire. He will show us the greatness of our people, our accomplishments, and the capturing and enslavement of the slave. He will teach us that we are the survivors of those who chose to survive.
You lose your faith, you lose your power. Minute by minute, hour by hour. If you lose your history, you lose your power. If it's to be, it's up to me.
Dr. Runoko Rashidi, world traveler for over 20 years, having been the only African American to have traveled to over 120 countries, learning our history, will chronicle our migration and existence throughout the world.
We're standing in front of the entrance to the shrine of the great African woman, Amanirdas.
In designing our future, economist Dr. George Fraser explains how we can overcome our learned behavior and gives us a plan of economic empowerment. He presents economic, ritualistic, institutional, and sustainable options. Economics is the core problem and solution.
And we need to listen to all of us who have taken up the mantle of wealth creation and financial education, financial literacy.
Know thyself. Dr. Molefi Asante will tell us about the concept of Afrocentricity.
That's why we don't say slaves, we say enslaved Africa. We were the ones who came up with that, Afrocentric. We were the ones who changed there's so much that's changed in the world now in academics that people don't give credit to.
Dr. Joyce King and her husband, Hasima Maiga, descendant of a Songhi king of the Songhi Empire, will give us personal insight of the Songhi Empire and all of its accomplishments. When people value themselves, they value others. Journey of the Songhi people. Still on the journey for freedom, equality, and economic rebirth.